Hello and welcome to yet another video. 2 in a week. How unique. Um, I'm playing a little bit of God of War Ragnarok. I never got to finish this game. In fact, I don't think I really got that far into it. Just playing the part of a bit of the game, I guess, where Atreus is section of the game or whatever.
What are you doing?
I know you get back to
You know it's not safe
Kratos,
to leave the path.
Yeah, I don't
but I
know.
thought I'd
Just like to look
just
over it
do
sometimes.
I'll put a video together while I was messing about with this. For the subject of this one, what I wanted to do was I covered the layoffs that had happened at Microsoft, and touched upon other companies that had been through these layoffs as well. But the focus of what I wanted to talk about with this video.
Okay. Caught a whiff of something awful near the Helheim Tower.
Oh,
Remember how to
hang
get
on.
there?
Yep, just past the Oarsman. But that's what makes you think Jormungandr's nearby?
I know what I
One
smell.
second, I just wanted to
Okay. Well,
figure out what it
lots
was I was
kinda
supposed to be
happened,
doing. Yeah,
and I need
it,
answers.
it, I was I finished up Death Stranding and installed Astrobot because I fancied just playing a different type of game than I usually end up playing on the PlayStation. And yeah, I installed Astrobot. Well, what really prompted me to do the video, we'll actually get to a point here, was just how long it took to install. And
Chest.
while I was going through that period of
Not so
time,
easy, huh?
I was like interested by just how things have changed in gaming. Many years ago, my generation, when I started playing games, my first console, as I've said before in the
Well, it's
past,
not gonna blow itself
was on a
So, Father said I
Radifin
cast a
TV
spell
game
in Fenrir
system,
town.
which was
I
just
don't know what he's
basically
talking about.
like a Pong
Accidental
clone
magic?
console.
That is disquieting.
But the first proper thing I played on was a Commodore VIC-20 computer, and back then playing
Lift's
on that,
broken. I'll fix it later.
you loaded the
Accidental magic's
games
not
via
all.
cassette,
It's
so
sort
you
of
would get these
turned into a
audio
bear.
cassettes, just like I mean,
Bear?
some of you out there might not actually know what the hell one of these
Yeah,
things is, but
but I lost control.
yeah, we had audio
Brain knows
cassettes
magic
back
better than
then that
anyone.
the
Pick it up.
data was recorded on,
Fine. We'll do it
and
your way then, Stin.
we
Venomous snake seems much
we used
safer.
to
It's
load our games from these cassettes, and they could take anything from 5 minutes to 20 minutes, depended on the game. And that's what it was like on the VIC-20. And you always had the delightful chance of the game not actually loading, and further to that delightful chance was also the glorious possibility of the cassette getting chewed up, which was always wonderful when your game got absolutely annihilated by the tape deck. And the tape deck was the sort of primary source of input at that time. That was the way we loaded
Great,
games. When I got my Commodore VIC-20, and they used this on the later computer, the Commodore 64, which I also had. That also used what they called a C2N cassette, and it was not proprietary. So, well, I suppose it was, but it was just a cassette player basically.
We're blocked.
That was
How
that
did
was
our Mercurius
designed
statue end up here?
as part
find a way
of, in the
through,
same
and
sort
I'll
of
tell you.
style as the computers, the
on.
Commodore 64 or the VIC-20.
looks worth it.
They both shared the same cassette system, and it did its job. As I say, it was woefully unreliable.
No way I'm lifting that.
It was
Maybe with some help?
it was
Don't look
bloody
at me.
awful at times, to be
Don't.
honest with you. But what you could later buy on the Commodore 64 was the 1541 floppy disk unit, or a clone one, I had a clone one made by, is it Evesham? I think it was Evesham. I can't remember now, but it wasn't the Commodore one anyway.
Stuck?
But it, you know, it
Maybe
did its
try
job.
arrows.
And what that eliminated
Now to
was
clear the rest.
one of the things I've actually just passed over there. But one of the things that came along with the Commodore 64 was this god awful system called multi-load. Now, for those of you that don't know, multi-load basically was the
I can't see the other side of the panel from here. Can you?
games would
Maybe you need a higher vantage point.
games would you'd load the game and it would load the main body of the game, and then it would ask you to stop the cassette player and 0 the tape counter. So this would now load the individual levels into the cassette player, into the computer. And then when you loaded the level, if you died, you then had to rewind the cassette back to 0 on the tape counter and reload the level. Again, it worked, but you know, you were in the bit of the lap of the gods. Sometimes the companies that process the tape, it would be fine. And on other occasions, some of the things that may actually happen would be that you'd have to make sure you got it absolutely spot on, because the gap between the main part of the game being loaded and then the level, the sort of gap between the tapes, you know, would not be particularly brilliant. And if you didn't get it absolutely spot on, the game would crash because it would start to take the wrong data source, which you know, isn't the cleverest of things, and would be quite frustrating, meaning you'd have to reload the whole game again. Not brilliant, but it's what we had. The floppy disk eliminated that. The loading times were slightly better with the floppy disk on the C64. They weren't fantastic. It was much better. I mean, it was considerably better than using the data set, and it was more reliable in the long run, and you didn't have to worry about your games getting chewed up. You know, unfortunately, like with the C2N, I mean, it wasn't something that was an inherent flaw. It's just with anything, with cassettes, when you stop, start, over time, you know, you've got to be careful that you don't get a bit of slack in the tape, section, and end up with the cassette ending up wrapped around the tape head reading thing, and yeah, there goes your game. £10 might not seem a lot by today's standards, but my paper route only paid me £1.75 a week back then, and so I had to save up for quite a bit. So, you know, my game's getting destroyed. Wasn't great. It wasn't a thrilling experience, to say the least. But we got by. And then, you know, I know not like a history lesson in games or whatever, but what happened going forward then was that we got the cartridge generation. Well, first we had the floppy disk on the Commodore Amiga and the 16-bit computers, which again, they were a lot faster, a lot more reliable than they were on the 8-bit computers. It was pretty good. You know, they worked quite well. They did the job. It was better than what went before. It was, you know, faster. And then we progressed to cartridges. Although cartridges were around from the NES days, obviously, and from the Atari 2600, of course, and other systems from that time. The consoles became much more popular with the Sega and Nintendo systems in the UK. Yeah, the Atari did quite well. I knew a couple of people that had it, But they
I
really
think the lift
took
switch is broken.
the console gaming to a whole new level, especially the 16-bit era.
You can fix it,
It's also
can't you?
worth mentioning, I'm a
Or
bit
does your
all over the
brother have
place
all
here,
the
but it is
talent after
also
all?
worth mentioning that the
Depends.
Commodore
Is your
64
father all the
did
muscle?
If I
have
say yes,
cartridge
you
games
realize
as
you're
well that
confirming
would plug
Brock is all the
into it.
talent?
So there's actually 3 ways to play games on the C64.
There. Let's get going.
But when we went over to consoles, it was cartridge based, and obviously that was even
Why are
more
you worrying
reliable.
so much today?
There was very
I just
little in
need
the
to
way
look
of
out for the
loading
people I care
times. They were
about.
more
It
robust.
keeps bad things from happening.
You know,
Freya
you
wouldn't
didn't
kill me.
have to worry about them. I
Norman
mean, quite
Gander's probably
often
not even
to
there.
fix a cartridge not
Besides,
loading,
he
it was the
likes
old
me.
blow along
He's
the
only eaten me
contacts.
once.
I had conveniently
That
scrubbed
was
that
9
from my
times
memory.
out of 10 the reason
Well,
why
we're
games
here.
didn't load or games crash, was simply because the contacts had gotten dirty and in the cartridge port, and that was it. And they cost considerably more though than tapes, because there was chips and circuit boards involved, which obviously you don't have with tapes.
Told you he's gone.
Well, have you tried calling him?
We then
Pulling the horn's
progressed
the first thing we
to
tried.
CD-ROM and DVD-ROM and Blu-ray ROM drives, which obviously again allowed for much larger data storage. And then we ended up with, you know, modern day, where the games now we get on Blu-ray disc,
That's not weird at all.
for the most part of the game is on the disc. Sometimes very little of the game is on the disc, and the rest of it is either, you know, is downloaded, and this is installed onto a hard drive, whether that be, you know, your standard hard drive or a solid state drive, as it is with the likes of the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, and more so now with or more increasingly more with PC. And it's just interesting to see how things sort of progress to the point where I think, for me, the pinnacle of it was on the place, you know, like the great balance came right on the Xbox 360 PS3 generation. Because one of the drawbacks we have these days, sadly, and it is I think a big drawback, is that because the game is now installed to the hard drive, and after you use the disk to install a game, is pretty much the disk is just to authorize usage of the game. It's like a key, as opposed to a source of data. That has resulted in because you're installing the games and they take up space on the hard drive, it becomes a case of you having to pick and choose what games you have that you install. I mean, if you have a reasonable games collection now, you're going to have a sizable portion of that collection that you have to install, and that's problematic in the sense that if you've got only you know, a portion of the game on the Blu-ray ROM and the rest of it is downloaded, then you know, you have to sit and wait, and it can be a few hours waiting for the game to install, and then you've also got patches which install with the game too. And I was thinking about this, and I know the big challenge, the big problem is, especially with 4K gaming, is there's only so much data you can have on a Blu-ray drive. I mean, I did look into this a little bit, and it seems that, you know, the Blu-rays can hold about 100 gigabyte. I believe you can get Blu-rays which will hold more, but it seems to be about 100 gig. And of course you've got games now which can be 150 gig. So with all the will in the world, like you have to have part of that downloaded from the internet. It appears to be the only way that it's done. I mean, I suppose you can use compression as well, but then it seems to be nowadays that you get this sort of hybrid system, And even if you're not, even if they do have the compression on the disc, and they do, will have multi-layered discs or whatever, however it works. I'm no expert, so. But you're then downloading patches, day one patches. Quite often the game itself won't work without that patch. And I was sitting and thinking, well, what it was, I was watching a video about about Microsoft and the Xbox One, and how people completely rejected the always online element of it. And Sony was like, oh no, you don't need to be online to play games on our console, and yet now we're in that place where there's a good chance, even with a single player game, that if you're not online, you can't play the game, because first of all you actually can't install all of the necessary files, and you also need to have a day one patch in order to get the game to work as well, because games these days can be shipped in broken states. And it's interesting to me just how gamers really totally rejected the idea of always online connectivity back in 2013, and it sort of crept upon us. The always online requirement has become almost a necessity these days, as I guess consoles have become more similar to PC games. And it's kind of a bizarre thing, really, when you think about it, because the great thing about consoles in the past was that they weren't like PCs. They didn't have the thing that PCs have, which was the whole sort of pain in the arse system of having to install everything onto a hard drive. There are obvious advantages. I mean, these days with the SSD drive on the PS5, it was very notable when I was playing Astrobot, was once you've gone through the headache of installing the game and its patches and so on, the actual game itself runs brilliantly. There's no loading times whatsoever between levels, which obviously was something that was an issue. With your physical media, your Blu-ray drive and your DVD-ROM drives back in the day, that you would have to wait while each level loaded. That's, in a lot of cases, not in all cases, some still have loading times. I mean, I play the F1 game on the Xbox Series X, and that really does have some long loading times in it, which is, to me, it's like it's not taking advantage or full advantage of the SSD system.
No way.
I mean, it's not mega slow, but it's notably slower than a lot of other games that I play on that system, and games that I play on the PS5. And even some now that I play on PC that are installed on the SSD drive on my PC. In fact, some PC games now require you to have an SSD in the system in order for you to install the game. If you don't, the games don't run very well at all, even if your system exceeds the minimum requirements in terms of processing RAM and graphics cards. I had Space Marine 2 on PC, and I installed it onto the standard hard drive, and it ran terribly, and at times it didn't run at all. It just wouldn't load. The moment I put it on the SSD, it ran fantastic. It was fine. So yeah, it's interesting just how things have changed quite considerably, and it's almost been a trade-off that we have real advancements in some directions, and in other directions we've kind of gone backwards a bit. What I don't like is, and there just really doesn't seem to be a lot that can be done at the moment, because I guess of the nature of because of the nature of the way that things are. I kind of just feel a bit annoyed that I have to sit and wait for an hour before I can play a game because of it having to install and download. The other thing that comes with that too is, games now most definitely have, games now definitely have a shelf life. They do definitely have a shelf life. I don't think there can be any doubt about that whatsoever. In the past, you could keep playing the game so long as you had the console, and the game itself, that was the limiting factors. But now you need the game, the console, and you'll need an internet connection in the future, because if you buy, even if you buy the same type of console, so to say, for example, in the future you buy the PS5 Slim, you have to reinstall a game. But not just that, you have to download the game, so you need internet connectivity, and you also need that game to still be supported online. And I think that's sad. I mean, it's just, again, it's another, it's another nail in the coffin, as it were, to the longevity of video games. It's interesting that I don't know much about it, I haven't really looked into it, but I know there's been this petition of Stop Killing Video Games that's been going around of late. What's interesting about that is, if that is passed, how these companies will deal with that. You've got various issues with it, you see. It's not just about companies dropping support of games, it's also companies ceasing to exist. If you're a game publisher or developer, or indie developer, and you've got, the game files on a server that people access and download the patch to, if you go out of business, that's it. I mean, what do you do with that? Does somebody else have to then pick up the tab to, keep these files on a server somewhere? I mean, it's a noble thing, but I just don't know how you work it in practicality. What I would like to have seen them focus more on the issue of expiring licenses. That means that classic video games these days you never get to see anymore because the license is expired. A good example of that is recently, well, not recently, it was probably about 3 or 4 years ago now, Atari released the Atari 50 collection, and they had a collection of their arcade games on there. There was a few notable absences, and one of them was the Star Wars arcade game, which to me, that's my favourite arcade game of all time. And that was on there, and that's an absolute classic Atari arcade. But because their license, it was a licensed game, that license is expired, or obviously it's transferred over to Disney now. That's it. Like, Atari can't just produce that game on compilations anymore, even though, it's a classic game of theirs, because they would now have to reacquire the license from Disney. My argument is that once you've paid the license to publish that game, then that's it. Just because another company comes along and acquires the rights to the Star Wars franchise, in this case Disney, that license has already been bought and paid. That should be tied to that product forever going forward. There should be no expiration for that. Making an entirely new Star Wars game going forward, fine. I think that then you renegotiate. But if you're just re-releasing something that was made years ago, no. I mean, why should Disney get any money from a license for that? That game was made back in, what was it, 1983, I think. You know, way before Disney had anything to do with it. You know, it's nothing to do with them. That license, that money has already been paid, and that should be attached to that game going forward forever. Because we see this with a lot of games that have subsequently gone out of existence, never to be seen again and never likely to be seen again. One of them, there was a great arcade game. I think Konami did the arcade game back in the 80s as the Aliens arcade game. You know, that will never be, you know, the Konami have released, I think it was back in 2019, the arcade collection. That game's not on there because their license expired. And, you know, it sucks because it's a great game, but it will never be seen again. And that element to it, that part of it, just needs to stop. It doesn't need to be carrying on doing that. You know, they need to have a scenario now where those licenses, like I say, they stay tied to that game, so you don't get these type of scenarios. Konami paid the money back then. I mean, actually, ironically enough, it's probably Disney again now, but Konami paid the money back in the mid-80s to make an arcade game licensed on that. They paid the money, they delivered, but years later they can't, you know, even though they're not making a new game, they're just re-releasing something that they created years ago. They can't do it, and so that is now lost. You know, it's a sort of a mists of time. No one will get to play that legitimately anymore unless you actually have the arcade game, the arcade machine, which that's not too many people. So I just think that something needs to be done about this. It needs to be some kind of thing put into place, because that they deserve to be preserved too. Let's face it. Why do they not deserve to be preserved? They're just as important, you know, as far as I'm concerned. They're just as important. So, you know, why is it only certain games deserve to be saved and others don't? But yeah, that was like, you know, sort of a associated sort of thought process with that. You know, how that was, you know, how I was kind of thinking how things have changed, but also like going forward, you know, with this preservation system, because like I say, console games and PC games now where you have this online service,
you know, get a different angle on the soundstone.
It's important. This stuff is important that we have these things going forward in the future, to be able to make sure that we can still play great games in years to come. And that, with the modern way that console games are installed these days, that's increasingly difficult to imagine how that's going to be possible. And you know, it's sad. I think of a lot of great games that will be lost. You know, not to necessarily just to the mists of time, but actually to the lack of availability, because of the fact that these games will, in essence, cease to function, even if you have the hardware, once the servers have gone. And you're just going to be, you know, even if you own the physical media, you're going to be left with an expensive coaster. And if you don't have the physical media, then you're still going to be faced with the situation of you know, having a
Wouldn't have to
game
hide things if
that
you
it
just
might
trust
show
me.
up on your library,
Trust you
but you not be
won't.
able to download it.
Actually,
There was a
that's a
good
good point.
example was the PT game, you know, that was released, which was like a demo that was released, and Konami
Maybe if you listen to me. Good or
removed its
not is hard to say.
availability.
Well, where do you
You
think I
actually
learned it from?
see people were selling PlayStation 4s at the time with that installed on it for a great deal of money, simply because Konami had made it unavailable. Even if you had installed it, you couldn't re-download it, and that was, you know, one of the, again, a thing that people reacted to, and you just saw like people were starting to sell their PlayStation 4s with this pre-installed on there, and you know, to me it just kind of sucks a little bit, you know, that that's where we're headed, you know, this sort of like video games having this shelf life. And when I was talking about, you know, art, video games and art back in the day, how we're just sort of, we're killing them off. There's like inbuilt redundancy to these things. Yeah, I don't like it. I don't like it. I think it sucks. But, like I say, it's a trade-off. It's a trade-off. I don't think there's any easy answers, any easy solutions to it. You know, we kind of put ourselves into this position. But yeah, I was kind of, you know, just, I was fascinated really how we went from being so opposed to the sort of digital distribution, digital sort of future that the Xbox One was sort of going for at the time. We sort of rejected it outright back in 2013, you know, only to then sort of embrace it almost again, like to accept it. And you know, I don't really grasp how we ended up in that place. You know, how we went from like, hell no, this, you know, rejecting it outright and mocking Xbox, you know, mocking Microsoft for their decisions, as it were, on with regards to the Xbox One, and I say rejecting it completely out of hand and saying no, you can take off and get lost. We're not having this. We've gone from that to, you know, just almost stealthily coming along, and us being now sort of held captive to this this crap. And it is crap, you know. At the end of the day, it's just it's killing off games. Ultimately, that's where it's going to end up, because this is what always happens. They want you to stop playing old stuff and play new stuff, but then it's sort of weird. The weird contradiction of that, of course, is they want you to play the new stuff, but they also want to sell games as a live service and keep you attached to one particular game until they're ready to release the next one, and then complain about why games don't sell. It's a weird, very weird scenario that we're in. It feels right now that we're in this sort of, how can you describe it really? Just a sort of, so it's a very contradictory place that we're in. You know, we want you to play new games, but we want to sell games as a live service, so you are stuck inside of this ecosystem forever. Well, that doesn't make sense. But yeah, but, you know, this is what we want. But it doesn't make sense. You can't have both, but they want both. I don't know. It was just some random thoughts, really, I had in my head while I was installing the game, and I was, you know, looking at how the good and the bad do exist, and really, you know, sort of the impact of this type of thing, and where we could sort of go with it in the future. You know, obviously things are just going to go to an all digital place. I don't think there's any doubt about that at all. That's where we've been railroaded into that direction. People have accepted it, that this is the way forward now, and you know, regardless of whether it's going to ultimately be beneficial or whether it's going to be something that we live to regret, I don't know. Personally, I just don't think that there's going to be much choice in the matter. I think the decision to go to the all digital future has already been set well into motion now, and we're just sort of clinging on desperately, I think, to the sort of last few years, last maybe not even years, you know, of having actual physical media. I think this will invariably go away, and it'll be all digital. They will have then full control over your game library, because that's the other thing with that as well. With this online requirement, they govern when, where and how you play games. That autonomy that you had in the past will be gone. And you know, you might want to play a game that day, but their servers are down, and so no, you can't, and there won't be anything you can do about it. You just have to not have it. Funnily enough, briefly last night, Steam went down and I couldn't play the game I wanted to play because Steam was down, and that game, even though it was single player, required you to be online. So you know, it's just a little snippet there into how things are going to go in the future, and they're not bothered by it. It suits them. They want that control. You know, like that Ubisoft have already said, you don't own the games. You know, you just rent the usage of it. You're just renting it. So, and they're not wrong. I mean, legally they're not wrong. Morally they are, but legally they're not. And again, this is just the way that things have gone. There's what do you do? How do you stop it? You know, you can vote with your wallet. I mean, that's always the way. But I think it's gone past that, and I don't think there's enough people that either care, they either see and don't care, or they don't see. Or, you know, the most positive sort of analysis I have of it is they see, they care, but don't think they can do anything about it. Ultimately, what it boils down to is that the future is going to be you're paying your £70, your $70–80 to rent a game, and when they deem that you've had it long enough or it's been out long enough, they'll remove it, and they'll remove your ability to play it, because they can do that overnight. Games are patched and updated overnight on console if you have that setting, and even if you don't, the minute you connect online it starts to download a patch, and you can't play the game without that update. And in the future, where you have to be connected all the time, you can't just not connect to the internet. They will have you into, they'll have you every way. They'll be able to deny your ability to play games, and it started out with a few games now, and it will spread. You know, it's spread. The online, having to be online has spread into single player games, even some that are single player only games. they've done it under the guise of leaderboards, or, you know, like in the case of Death Stranding, there's an online element to that, whereby you're not actually playing with other players, but they do things in the world that affects the environment, and you do as well. It's things like that. That's how they kind of put it in there. And it's nice. It's a novelty thing, but it, you know, I mean, I don't know whether you can play offline with Death Stranding, but to me, this certainly the element that I've played means that there is an online connectivity. Yeah, I say I don't see other players. I don't actually interact with other players, but there is that. That is there all the time. And there really isn't anything that you can do about it. You know, if that requirement is online all the time, then that's it. And in 20 years' time, even if you've got a fully functional PS5 and the game disc, and even if it's installed and update and everything's fine, if that game servers are gone, you're not playing it. And it's just another coaster, even though it's a single player game. And that's going to apply to a lot of other games. It's just these little things they put in it that essentially render it useless to you as a player. They've done it with Gran Turismo. You know, when you're offline, you can't access all game modes, and the reasoning was just absolutely pathetic. What do you do? Essentially, how do you... What can you do with that? Nothing. There is nothing you can do. Sad as it may seem, there is nothing you can do. You will be 100% at the mercy of these companies dictating when, where and how you play games. And if you're okay with that, I guess that's fine. If you're not, well, it doesn't really matter, because, you know, you're not going to be you won't be in a sufficient number enough to make them care. Because the one thing that I have totally noticed is just the general apathy that people have towards this kind of thing occurring, and, you know, that apathy is what these companies have relied on. They've relied on people being indifferent. They've relied on people being apathetic towards this type of thing, and that's it. They've got what they wanted. They got the apathy, and they're now free to be able to do whatever it is that they see fit to do. Yeah, and it's sad. There's been a lot of people have warned about this. You know, I've followed people on YouTube. Dean over Escape to Gaming has said it himself. This is what will happen, you know, unless people stand up to it. But I don't know, people just don't seem to care. And, you know, now it's in everything. It's in all aspects of gaming, even single player. The past, it was just multiplayer. It was relatively straightforward to avoid. It's like, fine, I just won't buy multiplayer games. Or if you do, you know, you just go, I'll buy them and play them to death and then trade them before they become worthless. But now that's just not an option going forward, because you know, sometimes it's been this real sneaky way in which they've stuck it into some of these games as well. It's been quite nefarious how it's been done, because you don't realise it until you've actually bought the game that there is this requirement. And yeah, you buy the game, you get it home, because it's a single player game. You think, you know, I'll be fine, it'll be fine. And no, it's not. There's that requirement there. They do put it on the box. nowadays. You know, they are required to put it. But I mean, how long is that going to be a thing? You know, how long does that requirement have to be listed on the box? Until now, there is an assumption that if you play games, well, you've got an internet connection, and then they'll drop that off the box. It's just a requirement because not everyone, believe it or not, has internet or has fast enough internet. Yeah, games now, like everything else, I guess these days, has an inbuilt. They have an inbuilt shelf life, and you get to play them because these companies say that you can. And yeah, that just sucks. But what can you do?
I got this.
What
right?
can you do?
Yeah.
Not a great deal. Anyway, that was just something I wanted to rant about. I mean, I have no solution to this. I know there's nothing to be done. You just either accept it and move on because we've already gone past the point of doing anything to stop it. That's already passed. Like I say, then there's other things now. I think that you have to worry about with gaming. You know,
Freya shouldn't be much farther now.
how much AI is going to take over in game development. I think that's something going forward that'll be interesting to see what happens, and the ramifications of that. Will we just start to see remasters of old games that is being done cheaply because, well, they just tell AI to make a game with, you know, high dynamic range, 4K textures, 60 frames per second, and what do they call it? Real time reflections, RTX, path tracing, ray tracing, whatever the hell you want to call it. They just put all that in and tell it to do it, and then come back a few hours later and there's your remaster. Send it out for digital download, charge 50, 60 pounds or dollars for it, and it's easy money. Is that going to be where we ended up? Because I think that is the ultimate goal of these companies. I think that would be their, for some of these game publishers, I think that would be their ultimate fantasy, to be honest with you. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's the door.
Just my thoughts. It's amazing, isn't it, when you're just sat waiting for something to install and your mind goes back to how things used to be, and you look at, well, this is better now, but this is worse, and then you look at where it's going to go and look at what is going on, and you just think, maybe I think the sort of Xbox 360, PS3 generation, I think will be remembered as the last generation that was gaming at its best and at its purest. Who knows? Maybe things will get better. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.